Hello, we are Group 9 from Working Group 102, Olivia Ruderman, Louise Schoolman, Rover Siebenega, and Lutz Smit. In this presentation, we will discuss the risk reporting requirements for companies in two jurisdictions, namely the United States and the Netherlands. I will start with the Netherlands. The Dutch law requires legal entities to make an annual report that contains at least a balance sheet and a profit and loss account. This can be found in Book 2, Title 9 of the Dutch Civil Code. This information is important for outsiders to assess the financial position of a company. It's especially important for potential investors who want to make informed decisions before they invest in a company. In order to facilitate that, there are also accounting principles. Some accounting principles are encoded in the law. An example of this is Article 384. This article contains the Prudence Convention. According to this convention, assets on the balance sheet should be valued based on their acquisition price and not on their intended selling price. This article also provides the legal basis for decrees by the government that set further requirements for how assets should be valued on the balance sheet. All of that, however, is purely the financial information of a company. Now, the law also requires companies to provide information on their non-financial position. An example of that is Article 391. The board of the company must report on the prominent risks and uncertainties that the company faces, which is more about the societal position of the company. Examples of this are environmental issues and concerns with the employees. Another example of non-financial reporting requirements in the law can be found in Article 391A. And this article is a legal basis for other government decrees on non-financial information reporting. One decree is the decree on the publication of non-financial information. The management board should explain how it deals with issues such as social issues, human rights, corruption, and fraud, and what policy it has and how it performs on that policy. Another decree that is relevant for us right now is the decree on the content of the management board report. This decree contains Article 2, and that article, the government refers to the Dutch Corporate Governance Code as the applicable code for the section of the annual report on non-financial information. So now we reach our interim conclusion that the Dutch Corporate Governance Code is not a law in itself, but it has a legal basis. The decree also contains minimum requirements for the report, but the most important elements are found in the Corporate Governance Code itself. And the rest of this presentation, we will focus more on how the code itself functions exactly.
All right, my name is Rover, and let's go into the risk and control statements companies are encouraged to make under the Corporate Governance Code of 2025. First, I would like to point out that the code works on a comply or explain mechanism. This means that that listed companies either must follow the rules, or if they do something different, they must clearly say so in their annual report. For the risk and reporting rule, two rules matter the most, which are Principle 1.2 and Principle 1.4. So let's dive into them. Principle 1.2 basically tells the board that they have to keep an up-to-date list of all the major risks. These risks can cover strategy, day-to-day operations, laws and rules, financial reporting, and with this you can think of cyber attacks, climate laws, supply chain problems, implementing new technology, all that kind of stuff. After finding those risks, the board must build control systems and fit them into normal work and make sure that they are clearly understandable for the relevant staff. So it basically gets implemented in the company's DNA, you could say. Principle 1.4 takes it a step further. First, the board must watch those control systems all year according to this principle. Then it should at least once a year test whether the system still works, and they should share the results in the management report. And what should be in this report? Principle 1.4.2 gives us the answer. It gives 5 items that at least should be included. 1, the main risk, so the main risk and how much risk the board is willing to take. 2, we have the design and operating effectiveness, so how the control system is set up and how well it worked last year. Then 3rd, it should give a short review of how the system handles operational, legal and reporting risks. It should also give show any big weak spots or changes, and the plan to fix them in those systems, and give a note that these points were discussed with the audit committee and the supervisory board. And lastly, it should show the sensitivity to major changes in external factors, so basically how sensitive profits are to big outside shocks. You could call it a stress test. Principle 1.4.3, this is the VOR, de verklaring omtrent risicobeheersing. This is a statement of the board in which they basically give us 6 clear promises. Promise 1 is that the report gives enough insight into any weak spots, into any deficiencies. 2, the control must give reasonable comfort that the financial numbers are not seriously wrong. 3, it should give also a statement on that the sustainability numbers also get at least limited comfort and in line with EU rules. Then it should also talk about the operational and legal risks that are managed, and that they are managed well, and that it shows any limits. The 5th promise, you could say, the board has to make is that the financial statements are prepared on a going concern basis, which means that basically the company can stay in business. And the 6th and last promise the board should make, is that all big risks that could hit the company in the next 12 months are listed. So put simply, Principle 1.2 tells boards to find and manage risks, while Principle 1.4 tells them to prove and explain what they did. And by following this, companies basically give investors and other stakeholders confidence that the risks are under control. That was my part of the presentation. Thank you for listening.
Now let's turn to the US legal framework for internal control and risk reporting, particularly under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, or SOX. SOX was enacted following corporate scandals like Enron and WorldCom, aiming to restore public trust in financial reporting and ensure corporate accountability. It fundamentally reshaped the legal obligations of US companies regarding internal control over financial reporting, also called ICFR. 2 sections of SOX are most critical. Section 302 requires CEOs and CFOs to personally certify the accuracy of financial statements. They must affirm their responsibility for establishing and maintaining ICFR, disclosing any weaknesses or fraud. This creates direct legal accountability at the top level. Section 404 goes further. Under 404A, management must annually assess and report on the effectiveness of ICFR. Under 404B, most public companies must have that assessment audited and attested by an external auditor. These audits fall under the authority of the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, PCAOB, created by SOX. The PCAOB sets the auditing standard, currently AS 2201, which mandates a risk-based, top-down approach that emphasizes controls most relevant to material misstatements. This legal setup is rules-based, not principles-based. It's highly prescriptive and mandatory, offering limited discretion to companies compared to soft law frameworks like in the Netherlands. Most US companies use the COSO framework for ICFR compliance, although it's not mandated. COSO sets out 5 components: control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, and monitoring. SOX is not limited to reporting obligations. It carries legal liability. False certifications can lead to civil and criminal penalties, which is a key distinction from the Dutch Code, where enforcement primarily lies on market mechanisms and reputational risks. Regarding scope, SOX is focused on financial reporting risks. It does not yet mandate internal control reporting on non-financial risks, such as ESG or cybersecurity, but this is changing. The SEC and investors increasingly pressure firms to integrate such risks into ICFR frameworks, even though the law hasn't quite caught up yet. Finally, a 2009 SEC study revealed that while SOX 404B compliance costs could range from $860,000 to $5.4 million, especially for smaller firms, companies also report substantial internal control improvements. Larger firms especially cited benefits like stronger audit committees, fraud prevention, and investor confidence. In sum, the US SOX framework adopts a mandatory rules-based approach to internal control, focused on financial accuracy and legal responsibility. Next, we'll compare these two systems and reflect what we can learn from each of them.
Hi, my name is Louis, and I'll compare the Dutch Corporate Governance Code with the United States. First, we can see that there's a clear difference in legal character. The Dutch Code is a form of soft law. It's not legally binding in the same way as the US legislation is. Dutch companies are expected to follow it, but they can deviate from it if they explain why. This is the comply or explain principle, which allows room for judgment and flexibility, rather than rigid rules. In contrast, SOX represents hard law. It mandates strict compliance with no room for deviation. It focuses on accurate financial reporting, internal controls, and personal accountability, especially for senior executives. Because of this legal distinction, enforcement also differs. In the US, enforcement is law-driven. It's overseen by the SEC and PCAOB, and violations can lead to investigations, fines, or even criminal charges. In the Netherlands, enforcement is more market-based. Companies are held accountable through transparency, investor scrutiny, and reputational risk, not through court penalties. Finally, we can look at the ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors. In the Netherlands, they are fully embedded in the Dutch Code. It includes guidance on long-term value creation, climate risk, and even the ethical use of technology. The SOX doesn't explicitly require ESG disclosure, but there's a clear trend emerging. Companies are increasingly expected to align their compliance practices with broader sustainability goals and social responsibility. So, what do we recommend? For Dutch firms, we recommend to embrace the idea of the VOR, verantwoord ondernemerschap, or in English, responsible entrepreneurship. While the code already provides a strong framework, companies should go further, embed ESG goals into their business strategies, actively engage stakeholders, and report transparently, even beyond legal obligations. This builds long-term resilience and trust. For the US firms, the key is to move beyond a narrow focus on legal compliance and embrace ethical leadership. That means embedding values like integrity, accountability, and sustainability into everyday decisions, not just when the law requires it, but because it's the right thing to do. By shifting from a compliance mindset to a leadership mindset, companies can better anticipate risks, respond to stakeholder expectations, and build trust that creates real long-term value, not only for shareholders, but for society as a whole. In conclusion, the Dutch and US system reflect two different philosophies. The Dutch model emphasizes flexibility, dialogue, and stakeholder value. The US model focuses more on legal enforcement, investor protection, and clear rules. But today, both systems face a shared challenge, moving beyond technical compliance toward ethical, purpose-driven leadership. Strong governance today isn't just about avoiding penalties or following rules. It's about aligning with core values like sustainability, transparency, and fairness. The future lies in combining the structure of compliance with the depth of ethical leadership. When companies lead with purpose and not just follow the law, they don't just reduce the risk, they create lasting value for shareholders, stakeholders, and for society.